I had the opportunity to stay at a bed and breakfast in New Mexico, just outside the Apache Indian Reservation. Although I can't recall the name of the place, it was a remarkable experience. Upon our arrival, we were warmly greeted by an elderly couple who owned and managed the bed and breakfast. They kindly gave us a brief tour of the property and its buildings. After settling into our room, we had dinner and then retired early for the night. The following morning, I slept through breakfast because I was quite exhausted from our travels. However, I briefly woke up at some point because I heard movement in the room. As I glanced around, I noticed a figure walking near the couch, which was situated across the room. I thought it was my mother, so I paid it no mind and went back to sleep. Around 30 minutes later, I woke up again to the sight of my actual mother and sister coming up the stairs. Confused, I asked them where they had been. They said they already had breakfast and took a walk around the property. They'd been gone for about an hour and a half and had not returned to the room. This revelation left me feeling uneasy, so I shared what had happened with them. Without hesitation, we hurried downstairs and approached the living quarters of the owners. We explained the situation to them, detailing what I witnessed. To our surprise, they calmly informed us that what I had likely seen was the ghost of a nurse who had resided on the property in the early 1900s. According to the owners, she would frequently visit the guests at the bed and breakfast, particularly approaching any male guests. Almost every person who stayed there had mentioned this peculiar phenomenon. I was utterly amazed by their explanation and wished I had been more aware to grab my camera and capture the moment. For a couple of years, my mother, sister, and I lived in an ancient house that had 3 incidents which defied simple explanations. The first incident happened when I returned home from school one day. Being alone, I entered the bathroom and, while seated on the toilet, the partially open bathroom door suddenly slammed shut. I considered the possibility of it being a result of air pressure since the place was drafty. However, what baffles me is how the door locked itself. It had an old-fashioned deadbolt style lock that required a specific antique key with a long stem. We never had the key. Plus, I even slammed the door countless times without it ever locking. After several hours trapped in the bathroom, a neighbor came over to try to pick the lock. When his attempts failed, he resorted to breaking down the door. He kicked it once, and just as he was preparing for another strike, there was an audible click, and the door swung open. The second incident involves a figure that multiple people, including my mother, sister, a babysitter, the homeowners, and myself, witnessed. It appeared to be a tall woman in a full-length dress with straight, long blonde hair. My mother spotted it first, once in her bedroom and another time in the living room during broad daylight. She kept quiet about it since the rent was cheap. The babysitter, who was also a family friend, reported seeing a woman sitting on the porch swing through the living room window, but when she stepped outside, there was no one there. On another occasion, she saw a similar figure in the yard, but given that we had neighbors, it raised some doubts. As for me, I encountered this figure when I woke up to find someone standing beside my bed. Surprisingly, there was no creepiness or fear, just a lady standing there. However, there was a distinct chill in the air. She turned and left, and assuming it was my mom's friend Sue, I got up and went into the hallway only to find no one there. When I woke my mother and mentioned it, she informed me that Sue wasn't staying with us that night. Since it happened at 5 a.m., I stayed awake afterward, making me doubt it was merely a dream. It wasn't until a year after we moved out that my mother broached the subject of a possible ghost. As she described what she had seen, it matched my own experience. We then spoke to others who had stayed with us, including the babysitter, and their descriptions aligned with ours, without any prompting from my mother. Even the homeowners, who were friends of my parents and from whom we were renting the place, admitted to considering it haunted when we asked them a couple of years later. They refrained from mentioning it at the time, thinking they were just imagining things. They described the ghostly figure as a tall blonde woman. The third and final incident had to do with the basement. The house had an overall eerie atmosphere that couldn't be easily dismissed as poor architecture or budget decor. People felt an unexplained sense of dread when inside. The temperature was always cold, regardless of the time of year. During the summer, we rarely needed air conditioning, but in the winter, even with the furnace running at full blast, we had to light a fire in the living room to keep warm. Although the house was spacious, drafty, and old, it had a new furnace, which should have made a noticeable difference. It did not. No one dared to venture into the basement for any reason. I myself never made it past halfway down the stairs. Even my dad found excuses to avoid going down there to check on the woefully inadequate furnace. Mom had the washer and dryer set up in the kitchen to avoid going down there. I moved into this large old house that my friend was trying to sell. Since it was empty and I needed a temporary place to stay, I decided to live there for a while. The house was devoid of furniture and amenities like the internet or a TV, so I relied on my instruments for entertainment. There was always a lingering belief that the place might be haunted. We heard footsteps, witnessed objects moving on their own, and my friend even claimed to have seen a lady walking down the hallway one night. But it was when I started living there alone that the creepiness truly intensified. I would frequently hear someone walking around and shifting things in the kitchen. As a way of asserting my dominance over the situation, I would confidently play my banjo in the living room while observing outside through the window. I would pause whenever the movement in the kitchen ceased, only to resume playing once it started up again. This cat and mouse game would go on for hours, leaving me alternately unsettled and determined. On one particular night, a friend joined me at the house. While we were sitting in the backyard discussing the possibility of the place being haunted, we suddenly heard a scream emanating from inside. It only reinforced our suspicions, especially considering that the previous owner had died there. Later, as I prepared to go to bed, I walked down the hallway and caught a glimpse of a blinding flash of light behind me and in the mirror at the end of the hallway. It sent chills down my spine. And of course, I still heard the eerie footsteps that night. Shortly after that unsettling experience, my friend, who was the homeowner, came over. Fearing the strange occurrences, we decided to sleep in the same bed. Throughout the night, we heard disturbing noises. When we woke up the next morning, we discovered that one of my socks, which I had left in the living room inside my suitcase, was on the bathroom floor and stained with blood. We had no idea where the blood came from. I immediately called my friend to come and investigate. When he entered the bathroom, all the towels suddenly fell off the towel rack.